So, Altaf Saab, we are streaming live on Facebook also. So, if we can start with your permission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please, Bismillah Kare.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening to our participants, and good morning to those who are joining us live from United States. It's morning for them. I wholeheartedly welcome you in today's communications webinar, which is being organized by JK Scientists. Today we are being joined live by Dr. Altaf Lal, Dr. Humaira Gauhar, Dr. Khalid Shah, and Dr. Rafet Hassan. Dr. Altaf Lal is a senior advisor, Global Health and Innovation, Sun Pharmaceuticals, India. Dr. Humaira Gauhar is associate professor in biochemistry at Purdue University, US. Dr. Khalid Shah is Vice Chair of Research, Birmingham and Women's Hospital. He's also Director, Center for Stem Cell Therapeutics and Imaging, Harvard Medical School, United States. Dr. Rafet Hassan is also joining us. He's Senior Investigator and Chief, Thoracic and GI Malignancies Branch, National Cancer Institute, NIH. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Altaf Lal, Dr. Humaira Gauhar, and Dr. Khalid Shah, and Dr. Rafet Hassan. This communication webinar is intended for our people back home who are in their master's or PhD programs or seeking one. The whole purpose of this webinar is to actually provide information and training on enhancing the soft skills, which includes, for instance, both oral and written communication skills, which are mandatory for job seeking or seeking admissions in higher education, or for instance, postdoctoral trainings, and also important for competing in job markets. This webinar will involve interaction with our panelists, and we also have some post questions from our registered participants. And our talk and the panelists will mostly focus on writing emails and follow-up emails, and how we can write curriculum vitae and how essay in labs and elsewhere as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Altaf. Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid Shah. Thank you so much, Dr. Humaira, and thank you so much, Dr. Rafet Hassan, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Khalid.
Okay.
Thank
so,
you. Thank you so much.
So we are pleased to have Dr. Altaf with us today. Dr. Altaf will be moderating this session. Dr. Altaf Saab, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Khalid, to everyone that has dialed in or will be dialing in over the next few minutes. Assalamu alaikum. A very warm welcome to each one of you. A very warm welcome to your extended friends and families. And I speak for myself. I speak for Rafet Bhai, Khalid Bhai, and my younger sister, Humaira. I want to thank the JK scientists who have, over the last 3-4 weeks, spent a lot of quality time figuring out how to make this interaction productive for you who have dialed in, and informative for us who will be speaking to you. So thank you, Khalid Gul. Thank you, Mubarak Saab, who may be joining us soon or may have already dialed in. He's from New Mexico. Jamil Saab, Asif Saab, and Saima. Before we start the conversation on communication, and we're communicating today, you would notice some of the attributes. You will notice some of the style. I'm not asking I copy your style or you copy my style, but I want you to focus on how we're going to have this conversation, because I have read many of your questions, and many of those questions will be answered with the way we engage with you. But before we start on the topic of the present webinar, I want to spend a minute talking to you about COVID-19. Those of us who are from Kashmir, we don't leave Kashmir. Kashmir stays with us. And what we hear is people are not following infection control norms as much as they should. We're not any good in this country also. We become the joke of the world in the United States. Most of it is because of the leadership issues here. But you, we, I together could do something remarkable. Only if we wore masks. If I wear mask, I protect myself. If you wore mask, you protect yourself and you'll protect me. if everyone wore mask for 15 days, you will bend the curve. SARS case Please think about it. Since this is a communication workshop and we may have 100+ people listening to us, become the champions. Each one of you would gain a lot. So you signed up for this workshop because you wanted to learn something. You wanted to hear us say things that you could absorb. And we're going to have a few slides that would help us convey to you why this is important. Before I do that, mege padai kashir man shuru buhri karla. Bosus rozan navigate. Angri osus param KMD basaninan tatpel lekit. Many of us have traveled where you are starting with, so don't be terribly disappointed if you say technology when it is technology. It to you will get. But the key is develop these skills, work on them. With that, Khalid Bhai, that's to you, Khalid Gul, if we could have the first slide, please. Khalid, that was to you, please. Thank you. Thank you. The first slide, please. So the next slide, please. So few of us put some thoughts together. And I assumed that there are going to be some assumptions made and some information shared. You will talk to us and we'll talk to you back. The assumptions I'm going to go with are based on who you are and what we know of, what I know of who you are, because it doesn't matter whether I have met you in particular. I have met you globally speaking because I travel to Kashmir quite often. So my assumption number one is you're all very special and talented students and young professionals with the potential and future to be the next leaders in your area of interest, whether you're working in biomedical sciences, you're working in engineering, humanity, whatever. And I would like you to self-attest that ki buchus jaan ladke, buchus paran wo ladke, and I'm going to become a leader. Leader is a relative term. I'm not asking you to become political leaders, but you may. To us, your participation in this event suggests that you are serious about enhancing your communication skills. And that's something you need to introspect now over the next weeks or months till you reach my age and till you reach the ages beyond me. And I'm going to ask each one of you who has submitted questions to the JK Scientist, please do a spell check on what you wrote. If my name is Altaf Lal, A should be with capital, L should be with capital. If I wrote Altaf with A capital, Lal with L lowercase, I wasn't paying attention to what I was writing. Lesson number one, be careful when you write something. It doesn't matter who you're writing to. We don't pay attention to how we write, what we write, grammar and stuff. And I can tell you for sure, even if you do not assume yourself, but you have the confidence and you need to develop the subject matter knowledge in area of education. Communicate वही कर पाएगा ना जिससे उसकी knowledge है. अगर knowledge कमजोर, you can't. Someone gives you a piece of paper, written notes to speak from. So, subject matter knowledge. If you're a student of law, if your students social sciences, environmental sciences, earth sciences, understand that fully, become a master. You have to dedicate sufficient time to improve your knowledge base, which will differentiate you from others. The better you're informed, the better you have knowledge base, the better you express. Your mentors, your supervisors will note that. You need to understand, and I believe you do, that the competition is real. Competition within Kashmir, competition outside Kashmir, and competition global. These are realities. Help only goes so far. Rest is all you. Finally, each one of you know, and by now, hopefully, and by the time we end this workshop, will understand that in addition to the subject matter knowledge, you need to be a good communicator. Agar sorich pata jawabich ne hakande, then it might as well be that you actually did not know the subject matter. If you're asking me a question and I can't answer it, your take home is emission pathi amuk jawab. The simple thing was I knew, but I didn't communicate it properly. Khalid, next slide, please. So I'm going to now talk about the information. This skill set of communication will come with time and experience. Don't expect that you somehow become extremely communicative, but you had to work on it. And do some your own strategies to get there. When you have those strategies, whether it's a group setting, one-on-one setting, talking to your father, to your daughter, to your spouse or friend, you need to know what you're saying. In other words, take 10 seconds. This is the topic of my conversation. And in professional and academic life, you need to say that at appropriate time. You need to know how to say, don't interrupt. There's something I call internally 5-second rule. I समझ क्या है, and this is not Kashmir, this is South Asian perhaps. We interrupt the other person when he or she has not stopped his or her comment. We do it out of anxiety, or we do it out of how we do things. So please, lesson number 1, keep in mind the 5-second rule. That means, agar ba kaat chus karan, I will stop when I'm finished. You count till 5 seconds that you know I have finished. And if you're going to meet someone of value, all of you are people of value, men and women, boys and girls, look up about him or her so that you know who Khalid Gul is. He's worked on food technologies. He's worked in Asia Pacific countries. He works in Rourkela. Do a little bit of background search on that person. And if you can, whatever the topic of your conversation is, prepare handout. You don't have to, at the meeting, use that handout. Magar suroiz demagas maz ki meri key messages kya thi, main talking points kya cha. You will come across much more intelligent, much more aware. And key messages and talking points are used by presidents, prime ministers, ministers, everyone, because they don't want to struggle for words that they have to use to communicate. That was on the oral side, and we'll come back to the same thing again. Now let me come to the written side. Writing is about storytelling. I was working with Khalid, I was working with Mubarak Saab a couple of months ago, and I told him, writing is storytelling. Storytelling means that you have to tell the person who's reading your stuff, why are you writing, what are you writing, when did you choose to write it, and how you're writing. My recommendation, prepare small paragraphs. I've seen and read and reviewed documents from Kashmir where the paragraph is a page long or a half page long. People don't have patience to absorb so much in a paragraph. The paragraph should be 3 to 4 to 5 lines at top, convey a topic, convey a theme. Your first paragraph will keep the reader engaged. If he or she lost you in the first 2 paragraphs, chances are they won't read with interest and passion. And your last paragraph should summarize why and you're asked what you're asking. Please edit again, and do grammar and spell check. I ask again, everyone who has submitted questions to JK Scientist, read what you wrote. I was able to understand your question, but if I had to do a spell check, grammar, I would have advised you, jaldi asna soznic, athos wuchun theek cha likit. PhD is capital P, lowercase h, uppercase D. That's a global norm. If you didn't follow that, that's not right. Universities, Punjab University, for instance, P has to be capital. And this is something that will come with time. Trust me on this, you'll get there. If you are wanting to do something quick, which is at time you may have to do something in 12 hours or less than 12 hours, have someone review and edit your document. So it's then garasmans ka ya gari never ka. And there is an art to follow up and how to follow up. Agar kaisi email lech about master's PhD program, don't send to him or her hardopat email. It's a wishta, because people understand the system of communication and you short circuit that. Perhaps 3 days later, Dr. Rafit, I hope you're doing well. I sent you an email 3 days ago. I know you're a very busy person, but when you have time, please do respond. I'll be grateful. Thank you so much, Altafla. Finally, I'll come back to what I said before. Writing is storytelling. Insan chu aran chu temis gaisi rozen he ech bad jaan athe likhe chu variya jaan athe story ch, and he or she is impressed. Now, this is my last slide, then I'll pass to Rafit and Humaira and then Khalid go. I know, I believe that all of you are better than me. And I want you to trust that. I know what I was when I was your age. I wasn't half as much. I wasn't half as good. But there was a little bit of confidence in me that I kept on moving. So I ask you, I request you to be confident. But that confidence will depend on having a knowledge base. You are the best teachers of yourself. Identify your weaknesses, if there are any, and work on it. Find a coach, become a coach. Coaching is always the best form to improve. Coach is then kath karnich, oral coaches, skill coaches, or in writing. And as JK Scientist evolves their work program, perhaps we can take this theme forward. How do we coach some people? And I request you, do not watch programs where the host is high on steroids, because you end up becoming one of those. There's only one television channel in India that you should watch. And I won't tell you what that channel is, but it is something like New Delhi TV. Everything else is going to confuse you as an orator. When you have a high value meeting, start preparing yourself 2 to 3 weeks in advance. The slide decks you're seeing today were prepared 4 days ago, 5 days ago by us. Your emails need to inform, they have to be very concise. Do not start with, I'm from Kashmir, the beautiful place in the world. That's not the purpose you're writing the email. Your email has to be asking, I have just finished my master's and I'm looking for places of excellence to do you intend to do. Reminder emails have to be spaced. Agar jaldi jaldi chakaran, that shows anxiousness. Agar space cha, it conveys to those who are receiving your emails that you're a thoughtful person. For higher education, and Rafet and Khalid and Humaira are going to talk about it in length. I urge you, US is not the only destination. You may want to, at some point, there are institutions of excellence outside as well, and that's a conversation JK Scientist is having with you, and I've seen some of the posting. Now, the key is to find the right place, right person in your field for higher education. We live in a very competitive world. Keep in mind. Kashir mas ruid chubasan competition shi mai pansa ladka ya hat ladka ya zahat ladka. These are multiples where you're going to compete with. Be the best by being the best informed and educated in your line of studies and work. If you can do that, that is something under your control. Each one of you have a job, even though you are not employed. And I have been always arguing with the students, your job is to be a student. Don't feel defeated if you didn't get admitted into a program at the first go. Don't feel rejected. That means someone better than you got there, or you weren't able to communicate properly. But your time will also come. With those comments, I'm going to pass to, I think we're going to Rafet next. So Rafet, over to you.
Thank you, Altaf, and thank you for connecting me with JK Scientist. So I did not know much about JK Scientist, and but I have looked to the website, and it's really very impressive. And thank you, Khalid Gul, for organizing this. And especially thanks looking at the website to Dr. Said Mubarak Hussain for founding JK Scientist or Kosher Scientist. Really very impressive. And looking at the other sessions you have had, I'm really impressed, and we'll be happy to be involved. And so this is really great, and thanks for organizing this webinar. Just a background, I grew up in Javai. I'm originally from Baramulla, a village called Shitlu, further north. So I'm not a PhD. I did my medical degree at Government Medical College, Srinagar. But now I run a lab as well as see patients. So Altaf said a lot of things, and I usually interact with postdocs in my lab. We don't have a master's program. And my advice for someone looking for a postdoc is select a great mentor. And that's a lot of luck, but it doesn't matter whether you go to a very famous lab or you go to a lab where the PI is just starting. You need to find a person who will guide you or mentor you and give you the opportunities so you can progress in your field. And I was very, very lucky to find an outstanding mentor, and that really was very helpful. The second thing, you have to be your best advocate. As my mentor told me, if you don't advocate for yourself, no one will, because others don't care. So you have to be your best advocate and put forth in a nice way, as Dr. Altaf mentioned, why you are the best person to be taken by that lab. And be prepared to learn new skills and new challenges, meaning getting out of your comfort zone. And I had to do a lot of it. As I mentioned, I did my MBBS and in Srinagar Government Medical College. And we really don't do lab research. I had no concept of what a lab is or what lab research is. I did my medical training in the US and came to NIH to do my clinical training in medical oncology. As part of our training, we are asked to select a lab you might want to work with. And so I selected a lab run by Ira Paston. So he's a very well-known scientist, and two of his postdocs got the Nobel Prize in medicine. So it's a big lab. So I went to Ira and told him that I want to do some lab research, but I have no experience. So he said, that's fantastic because you have not learned any bad habits. So I will teach you good habits. So that's where a mentor comes in. And I worked in the lab. That's the first time I learned how to pipette. I was 30 years old and I didn't know how to run a centrifuge. One day I caused a fuse in the centrifuge, so they had to get the fire department. But you learn those things. So it's outside your comfort zone. But that was a great training because I had a great mentor, learned new skills, and that allows me now to do translational research where I run my lab and then we are able to take those treatments to patients. So the key is, again, finding a great mentor, which is a lot of luck, but also learning new skills. And then once you get a postdoc or maybe a master's, one has to be very focused and not get distracted by other collaborators. All of us, you meet someone in the lab or in the adjoining lab and they tell you, I have this great idea. And, you get tempted to collaborate. But I would say that one needs to be very, very focused and always think what is best for me. And there's nothing wrong with that because this is a very tough world. So you have to educate and think what is best for me. But one has to do that in a pleasant, collegial manner. So if you don't want to do something with your collaborator, you could say, wow, this is fantastic, this is great and very interesting, but I'm really busy with my project and maybe after I'm done with my project, I can consider it. So you want to keep the goodwill and be collegial, but at the same time, do what is in your best interest. And lastly, I would say that one has to be passionate about your work, and it doesn't matter whether one studies physics, biology, social sciences, humanities, and to be really very passionate about your work, and so the others can see that. And then I think the most important thing is that your job should feel like a hobby. It's not like it is a job and you should love that and be happy that someone is paying you for doing that. And lastly, I would say the most critical thing when I look at postdocs or other positions is a letter of recommendation. And it is critical that how your mentors or others write the letter and the positivity that it shows. For me, I always look at the letter, and if the PI is very enthusiastic, that's great. So you need to bring that positive energy into the lab. So I think overall that is what my philosophy is, and but I think that we have, looking at your website and others, we have such talented scientists, students, and it's just a matter of opportunity and luck. So thank you all for organizing this, and happy to take any questions towards the end.
Thank you, Rafet. Humaira, could you please begin now?
Okay, now I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah. Great. Assalamu alaikum. And again, thanks, iterating thanks again to JK Scientists for organizing this. This is, I have been associated with JK Scientists for a while and intermittently, although most of the work gets done by a lot of other people. And I am really glad that you have organized this fantastic webinar, and it's really needed as you all have reading the questions. It's clear that there are a lot of people who have very important questions regarding communication. And I can say one thing to begin with is my journey from PhD to becoming a professor was the sharpest peak in learning was about communication. Rest, I had learned it all while I was doing my lab research, wet bench research during my first 3 years of PhD, more or less. Once you get that nailed down how to do that, there's not much of learning after that. But what really you learn tens of years, 15s and 20s of years, I guess decades, is how to communicate what you do. So yeah, I think that way, this is a great, and I can only tell you what I have learned, not much. So as you all pointed out, people before me, it's about oral and written communication skills that are as critical as doing great science. In your is my slide up? I think so.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let me just look at this.
Sorry, Humaira, you are muted. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah. I don't know how I got muted. So oral and written communication skills are both important, right? And you guys know that they're not necessarily always taught in the lab. You're expected, unfortunately, to have some of it by yourself, and eventually some of it you have to learn. So when I was as a PhD student in first in Indian Institute of Science, and eventually I moved to Germany, there was really, I didn't even feel much need sometimes of where I have to talk, because the first communication that I learned started with journal clubs, right? So I think take your journal clubs very seriously. I mean, I still remember my first journal clubs as a PhD student, and being asked questions and me replying or taking up the questions from my colleagues as if I was the owner of that data, and getting very defensive about that. Why are they not understanding how right these people are, right? So just that moment of I know it, but why can't you understand, and why am I not able to tell you that this data is saying that, was the moment, I guess, when I realized that, oh my God, I don't know how to speak, I guess, or I don't know how to even talk about somebody else's story. I understand it very well, but how am I going to really present it that I do not have questions which were really obvious to me? So this obvious to me and obvious to them, perceptions, all of these you have to really be very cognizant of, is that what you see and what you understand and how you feel it is not necessarily how others do, and you have to strike that balance. Is what I'm saying, is it clear, right? Is it am I clearly saying what is being done and what I'm thinking? So I will kind of hit some of the high points here, because a lot of it has been talked by Altaf Saab and by Rafid before. Now you'll ask me, so I go right into the idea of say written communication skills. Although the points about writing communication is just simple communication, whether it's oral or written, the high points are always the same. So most important thing, what I have seen often with students, postdocs, is that they will be great, but they get used to the idea of doing wet bench, right? They like it, they get results, they will just type them roughly up and throw them in an Excel sheet, and feel like somebody else will come and put it together. That attitude is the most worst of the attitude, is the killer that you will have. You will generate data, you'll have those 200 Western blots, and you will not have picked up the one that you really want to publish, right? So, and you will leave it to your PI to think about that. That's the worst of the situation I have seen many students, postdocs be in, is that they are data generators, right? And if their PI is a young outgoing PI who you are, and you are the only postdoc or a PhD student, or there only is a small lab, you may get away with that, right? In the sense, because that person has his own career, he's looking forward to it, and he's going to maybe pick on you and or yell at you or tell you, no, come on, give me that. I need to. But if you're in a big lab, which most of you aspire to be in, right? That, oh, I want to be in that so-and-so's lab. There'll be 12 postdocs, 10 postdocs, right? And if you're someone who can only generate data, not organize it, not analyze it, not put it together in a presentation, not create a story out of it yourself, you're going to be just a data generator, and your PI will have never time to look at it or help you in that matter, right? So you really need to be able to, after you generate that data, is put it together, right? Always create a PowerPoint presentation of everything that gets out of your bench work. Your Excel sheet should be organized into sheets. A big worksheet should have experimental repeats as small workbooks. You know, you have one workbook and multiple sheets, right? You should have this analysis sheet where your PI asks, so what did you do? That you're not scrimmaging through the hundreds of files and, oh, what did I do? I cannot find that. Oh, I have done that, but I cannot find it. That moment is the moment that your PI will take with you till he's writing the letter, and write that you not necessarily have great organization skills. So you have to really be an organizer. This is, again, something maybe you may not be taught well, but this is a different day and age today, right? A JBC paper is not expected to have 4 figures anymore, right? You may have 10 supplementary files for a JBC paper also nowadays. You may have 8 figures and A, B, C, D, E, F, G on each figure. That means you will end up generating a lot of data, right? And that organizing that data and making it a story is going to be your responsibility, right? So that is how you move forward fast from making data to making it into a paper. That is how you publish, right? So you don't publish by data generation, you really publish by organization of the data and presentation. So then what you do, excite your PI that he's ready now to help you write. Then another important thing. Now, once you have the data, so this also goes to, of course, that helps you even in your oral presentation when you're going to go up for a lab meeting or a data meeting, show a slide, right? And then there is that Excel, there's a graph. Neither there's a proper title, nor you have written X and Y axes, right? I've seen those kinds of slides come through sometimes, and that is really, really annoying, right? When you put up a slide and somebody wants to see the slide, it should be really clear from the slide what you're really going to tell. Nobody should have to wait for you to talk about it, right? It should have all the elements that are required for the audience to kind of make a guess of what this is going to be like. Of course, you don't write everything on the slide. That's another problem. When people write everything, it's too crowded. But whether you are writing a paper or writing this kind of an attitude of making a complete figure and making a clear slide is a very important one. Like Altaf Saab said, also, besides having all the other editing mistakes, right? Also make the data look the way it should, right? It should have full all the parts associated. And then again is the storytelling. Now storytelling, I kind of was storytelling is really an art, right? What you have to first do is you lay out your problem, right? You lay it out as a question, and then the question should be laid out in a manner that other people reading it should be really curious then later about, okay, so what is going to happen? And then you pitch a solution. That's the most important thing. Between laying a question and creating that, laying that question, it's not just start saying a question, you lay it out. When you between laying a question and then pitching the solution, that part of your writing is the most critical part. That's the first paragraph of whether it's a grant, your specific aims, or whether it's even in the abstract of the paper, right? The abstract of the paper, that is the critical part. You pitch your problem, and you say the problem, and then you pitch a solution, and you phrase the potential outcomes. When you phrase those potential outcomes, they should make the person now ready to go out and read rest of whatever it is you have written, right? Because then the way you phrase the potential outcomes should be such that now person wants to know, how did you really come to that point, right? How does she say, this is the problem, this is what I feel like is the solution, and this is what we have done it, and this is what we get. So that starts with this is the art of storytelling, and you have to really develop it, right? Also, this goes also with when you write cover letters for jobs, right? This kind of structural element in your writing is very key to whether you get people interested in you or not, right? In the way you write about yourself, right? And I had really for that, kind of thought of in that matter, persuasion is what is with the heart, right? You have to hit we hit the bullseye. You say exactly. The term is say it the way you mean it, right? Don't turn unnecessarily Shakespearean. If you are Shakespearean, it's not bad. Then maybe some point in time you have to think that, do I really want to become a scientist, or do I want to become a science writer? If you can't leave your Shakespearean style, there are people who love that, and they end up becoming something else. And those careers are great also. Science writing is a great career. You need Shakespearean writing, but if you really become a scientist, you really need clean, short sentences, boring sentences. But those sentences should clearly communicate. It's in the flow, not in the sentence. It's not in the use of heavy-duty words, not all the jargon, but it has to be scientific jargon and clearly communicated, right? So that I don't have to spend. I have 10 minutes read your specific aims page. I in 10 minutes should know if I have 12 grants, NIH grants. I sit on NIH study sections. I get 15 grants to read. I don't want to spend more than a few days on it. Every specific aims page comes through my desk. I will want to read it in 10 to 15 minutes and be interested in reading the rest of the grant. If the person didn't communicate that in 15 minutes to me, I'm dragging myself like, okay, I'll read this one later. That cannot happen. That cannot happen in a specific aims page, right? You really have to be very, very persuasive in that page as to why what you're doing is exciting and how you're doing it, and how this outcome is going to change, move the status quo, right? You're going to push the bar forward. In what way? That bar could ultimately be really as tiny as my pen, right? It doesn't have to be a big bar, but you have to show that you can push something. Okay, so don't think that you have to always pitch like some crazy great science, but it's really all in the writing. So and also honest and genuine is the key. That honesty and being genuine should reflect in your writing. You cannot make things up. People really see through you when you write about things, when you write about yourself. Exaggeration is great, but you can't over exaggerate. You write about, oh, I know 10 computer languages, but it is not reflected in your publication. There is no need to write that, because people will be like, oh, so you knew all of that, you did not even know how to use it. That's even worse. So don't be your own don't hurt yourself by over exaggerating. Write about yourself in your CVs. All that is really relevant, and all that is in some way reflected in some of the work that you have done. If you have learned something and you have not published it, then put it in your personal statement in how you, what you can do with that skill, at least, right? It's not about just throwing a laundry list of skills, or I know this and that, but it's about, again, the story that's going to be in your personal statement that is written as a part of the cover letter, as to what you're going to, how you have used those skills that you're going to lay out in your CV, how either you have used them or how you plan to use them, so that people see that you are very genuine. So your personal statement, how do you kind of develop? So I was kind of writing your notes so that I don't lose track of my talking. Is you ask yourself 3 words about yourself. Say, who am I? Right? Ask yourself. So write three words about yourself. Then go to your friend and ask that person, somebody very close to you. Say, can you write 3 things about me? How do you describe me? Now match those. So someone says you are this, and you would have written this for yourself. So whatever is the match between what other person says about you and what you think about yourself, jot that down. That is what you want, how you want to describe yourself, right? Then you have to list your core competencies, your skills, your talents, your accomplishments, your experiences, awards, degrees, promotions, whatever you have. Then what you want to achieve, say, long term, or maybe if you're going for postdoc, then short term. If you're going for an academic or a position that is expected you to have a vision, then you want to say, what do you want to accomplish in the next 10 years, right? Then what you do is after that you write your value statement, right? In the sense that what do you stand for? For example, for PIs, a teaching statement is usually tends to become a value statement in some way, right? I would like to contribute in the development of, or be a mentor and develop, help people identify their passion or goals or whatever, right? So those kinds of statements, right? So when you package all of this together, that becomes your personal statement. This is how you write a personal statement, right? You have to have a list of these things. And then you have to put together a compelling story. Like I said, what did I miss any points? And then story, why one thinks the story is important. Remember one thing, storytelling, we human beings are hardwired to be very receptive to a story. If you many of you here would have inshallah read Quran, and these are not fables. Most of the Quran is storytelling, right? And if Allah knows better that we will be engaged in storytelling, so you can imagine that book is like, most of it is stories, right? So it's because it engages you, and so that itself is a testimony why storytelling really works. It works. For human beings, we don't like numbers, and God never says in the book that if you see so many numbers and I send you so much and that percent of that went down and that percent of that. So that's how you really think about your own work also. What else did I have? Clarify your objectives. I think I want to just hit this last point now: attitude and self-awareness. You have to have the most important thing really eventually will be, is as you go on from one job to the next is your attitude in the place that you have been working. It's very important to be self-aware. What does self-aware really mean is that you have to understand that everybody comes with some level of prejudice, right? I am a Kashmiri, I'm prejudiced potentially against that and that, and that person is a white person and potentially maybe prejudiced because I don't look like him. Having self-awareness and awareness of your environment where the prejudices can potentially come from, you can help reduce them, right? You don't have to fight them, right? You have to just make them, nullify them. You have to kind of make them irrelevant or reverse the effect of that prejudice. And how do you do that? Is by just being aware. For example, if someone that is going to take your down your statement or something because he thinks, or you say that I'm capable of doing that, and that person may not accept it because he thinks you cannot for no reason. You give another evidence that you can, and that will just reverse it. Instead of going out and fighting and getting angry that how can you think about that, I cannot do it, right? If somebody else who is also as good as I am on paper can do it, or he doesn't ask him about that evidence, don't worry about that. You want your things to move forward, and for that you need to take cool and just present the evidence, another evidence that you can do that, and that should just suffice it, because then you are reversing the effect of the prejudice. Identification of prejudices in you so that you do not do the same thing to others, right, is very important, because that lab environment that you are in, whether particularly when you go out in doing postdocs in foreign countries, we already face an extreme problem in communication skill. I mean, I have always seen this happen. We go because, and it is not real communication skill. It is also something to do with cultural differences, right? We in Kashmir or in South Asia see certain things as normal, and we just think, okay, we'll come and we'll do it normally, like Altaf Saab earlier says, interrupting people. Right, it's not a big deal. Somebody's talking, you just talk over him. It's not a big deal, right? And people don't take that so seriously in our countries. But no, that's not how you do. That's first of all wrong. I should say that we should not do that. We should really change that as a culture also. Second, you have to be. That becomes a disrespect thing. So you have to lay out points of what is considered disrespectful in this new society I have come in this new lab I have come in this new environment I have come in, and then are these things going to be harming me in some way? Okay, so gender biases are so obvious at times that you would not even believe, as much as we see this kind of a prejudice. Oh, that PI is a woman, and then have a biased understanding of how she is going to run the lab. She must be really tough. That's why she's having great papers. No, she could be a happy go and I don't want to use words now, but American jargon here. Yeah, and she's also bright, and she knows her game, and that's why she is. Not necessarily that she has to, be very tough. The image of only tough women can make it is also a little unfortunate for us, but we have to deal with this, right? I'm not tough. I got a couple of kids. I'm a happy-go person, and I like my lab. I like my people. We are talking. Actually, most of my lab people actually try to avoid me because they know that I'm going to waste their time by talking to them. So, so reduce these implicit biases, personal biases, and make sure that they don't reflect in your writing or in your communication with your peers, as well as, because really, ultimately, when people talk about you or write about you, the paragraph about attitude is taken so seriously, whether it is going for a postdoc position or whether it's going for a PI. Everybody wants to have a great environment around, and they don't want to have a colleague who will create some kind of a problem when they are around. So one last point is listening and develop a thick skin, right? You will get feedback from people, like I told you now. Now listen to what I'm saying, right? Try and understand. Imagine, just remember one thing, Altaf, me, and Rafet Saab is here. This is a time that we are putting in here. There's really many other things I could do. I could have been sleeping at this time. So not that I'm doing something great, but then this at least, this gives, we expect that when we are here, you are listening. And then when we give you feedback, you develop a little thicker skin, in the sense that when someone tells you, look, this is wrong, this is in science, you cannot help this. People will tell you this experiment is flawed. Also, sometimes they'll tell you you're lying. You will feel as if that person is telling you that. You have to really be able to take that and convert into a positive statement. Criticism is we are, in science, it's the only place where you get peer review. Can imagine your own peer can tell you what he feels or does not. There is no layers of, there are no bosses really when it comes to who moves forward in terms of reviewing papers and reviewing. They can be your own friends who will come and tell you this is not good enough, right? So you have to develop very thick skin and be able to take criticism and accept the feedback, and then use that feedback positively to help yourself. So I will kind of end here, and happy to take questions too.
Altaf Saab, sorry, you are not audible. Okay, Khalid Saab, if you can come in, please. Please unmute yourself. Khalid Saab, please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, cool enough. All
right. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Altaf, for putting this together. I really applaud JK scientists for doing what they have done in the last few years and putting this webinar together, which is fantastic for people back home. And of course, as Altaf Bhai said, although we're living here, but we think of Kashmir almost every hour, what's happening there. So one thing I just wanted to mention, that you are, people who are seeking for masters or seeking for PhDs or for postdocs, you're much aware of COVID. So I think you are our beacons to educate the rest of the public that what it really is, and because you understand the science. So please be safe, but also be very educative to our society, which is critical in these tough and unprecedented times. So I think most of the things that Altaf by Rafet and Omera, they covered most of the things. One of the key things that I think that drives us all is passion. Do I really want to do this? The rest will come. And as Altaf Bhai mentioned that, we all learned on the job. We were not trained to do what we're doing today, whether it's writing grants, whether it's training people, or whether it's mentoring people. We were really, we learned every time we picked up something was on the job. But there's that drive that I want to do something that just, takes over everything. The way you write, the way you talk to people will come because, that's, you want to be somewhere. It's like being at the top of the Mount Everest and you have to climb and you'll figure out ways to climb that mountain. And that will of course come. So the one thing I really wanted to share, because deep inside me is a teacher who really teaches every now and then, and of course loves to learn as well. And that's how I can teach better. There are 5 cognitive areas, cognitive functions that everybody has. And I think we, when I was growing up in Kashmir and we were taught about learning and memorizing things. That was our metric, that okay, you do well in tests because you can memorize things. And with time, you realize that memory alone is not your driver. It's 5 areas. And now, learning about brain and its function, we know that there are 5 areas which control memory, attention span, as Altaf Bhai mentioned, attention to details, speed, your flexibility, and your problem-solving skills. And Allah, in such a way, we rarely get all 5 of them at the best. So all of us either have 1 or 2 or 3 good traits, and we miss 1 or 2. And people over time who are very successful, that's why you see people who top your metric exam or your 12th class, you don't see them as the most successful people in their 50s. There's a reason behind that, because our system was testing people on their memory, and maybe some kind of speed, but over time, other people acquired other stuff. The problem-solving skills, the flexibility, and attention span, and those people become successful. So don't, we all know that you can't top every exam, and that really does not matter at the end of the day. So have confidence that maybe you have other skills that are in you and have never been harnessed. And that is, again, looking deep and thinking deep. And there are, there's the subconscious mind and something beyond subconscious mind, which allows you to think deep, that you can do things beyond what others think. So confidence in yourself that there is something there in you that you can actually drive things is essential. So my experience, I think, again, all 3 speakers have covered most of the things. From my experience, I came here, I studied in Europe, did my PhD there, and I came here and did my postdoc. But over years, what has happened is I've run some years, run the center for certain years, and now running the department for the last 3 or 4 years. And I've seen people from different nationalities, different colors, and different different upbringings, and what I've noticed that there is always something in them in different people, and I came to this country, was mentored by 2 excellent people in my first 3 years, and they picked me out of nowhere. Honestly, I was not really great at writing. I just was passionate about what I was doing, what I wanted to do. And I met them at a meeting once, and they said, well, send us your CV. And my CV wasn't that great. I mean, it was in my first year of my PhD and I hadn't really published. And they saw something which I don't know. They said, okay, when you're very close to finishing, write to us. And I wrote and they said, come for an interview. And I had a position a year before finishing my PhD. And I, again, honestly don't know why. There was something hidden that I didn't know myself, but I had that drive that I wanted to cure brain tumors at some point. That was the drive, what I had. And the rest came because my writing skills improved over time, my communication skills improved over time. And when I have to select now, postdocs for my center or faculty for the department, the two things I look at is if somebody emails me, and in that email, somebody writes, oh, I want to come and has an excellent CV, but hasn't looked at what I do, what my lab does, what my center does, hasn't paid any attention to that, I really don't look at the CV. I really don't look at the email because they haven't paid attention. So if I do get 100 CVs in a month, why would I pick? I mean, 10 of them are excellent, they're great. Why would I pick somebody who hasn't looked at what I do? And that's what I mentioned in the beginning, that attention to detail. When you write to somebody, you have to actually go deep into what they do and tell them, this is what you have done, and this is my skill set, and maybe I can come and do this because of my these qualities. And this is really important, that you actually go deep into, don't write to too many people, write to few good people whom you think you have a chance and your skill set matches what they're looking for, and then go deep into their labs, go deep into their centers and see what they have done and how you can contribute. Because at one point you have to realize that you have to be more of a giver in the beginning than as a taker. So think that way. When your thought process is like, I'm going to give this is, and people will take you seriously. So this is one of my experience. I might be completely wrong in some of the way I pick people, but this is one of the key things that I look at. How deep have people gone into our work and what they think of our work. So the other thing that I want to bring up is diversity. Again, we sort of try to don't think that when you write to a PI from Asia or a PI from Kashmir that you're going to get a positive response, because at some point we all become very competitive. We'll pick up very competitive people. Write to people from diverse backgrounds. You will be surprised that you might get a better response from people from different nationalities. And one of the things that I have done over the last 10 years is picked up people from diverse nationalities and diverse cultures. And we can proudly say that, trained like people from 42 nationalities till this point. Is fundamental how I came here, because they could have picked up somebody else other than me, an American, but it was the diversity that brought. And if you keep in mind that there is diversity, people value who you are as a professional rather than where you come from. That's the other thing that should give you confidence. The other thing I wanted to share with you is what Tumera and Rafet and Altaf all three pointed out, is the confidence in you. And this goes not when you're writing, but what you're doing when you're not writing to people. Take soccer or football. So when the soccer is played, it's not when you have the ball under your feet and you're playing that ball, that skill set, that's given, but it's also about when you don't have the ball. What do you do? Because there's more than 50% of the time when you don't have the ball, and what you do in the field during that time. That actually defines what you do with the ball. Your positioning, your thinking of what the others are doing, your thinking of where the defense is, where the offense is. So that is key. What you do in your downtime, your thought process, and cultivate that thought process that will reflect on your CV or on your written statement or on your the email that you send out. I think these are the areas maybe we can once we end the session, then we can actually take questions and more things will come out, because I just thought that these areas where I personally thought that I've been involved in one way or the other. But two things: passion and belief in yourself. That drives you, and the rest will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Humaira. Thank you, Rafet. Khalid Gul, let me pass it back to you. Run the event from now on, from this point on, and we'll respond to the questions that may have come before or may come during this program.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. It has been great to hear you all through. Dr. Altaf Saab, Dr. Rafet Saab, Dr. Humaira Gawhar, and Dr. Khalid Shah Saab. Thank you so much. So we have a lot of questions with us. Some of them are repetitive, and some of the questions have been already taken care during your presentations. So we have one question from Dr. Wasim Akram. He says that how do you think? I think let's go to Dr. Humaira Gawhar first. Dr. Humaira. So the question is, how do you think SciComm is going to be a post-truth era, dealing with conspiracy theories, fake news, and the like, when the means of information dissemination are far more vulnerable to manipulation? Can you hear me? Just a second. Okay, please unmute yourself.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, please. So Dr. Wasim Akram says that, how do you think SciComm is going to be in a post-truth era, dealing with conspiracy theories, fake news, and the like, when the means of information dissemination are far more vulnerable to manipulation?
Post-truth era. First of all, the key to the good communication is to make your question much more clear and less wordy. The first answer to his question is, I would have wished that he had put his question in much more simpler terms than it is now, because it is confusing me, and I don't know what he really wants to, what era we're talking about, and which post-truth era this is, and what is the truth. And but if I understand it fairly, in science, we don't have much of the, if you're talking about coronavirus conspiracies and whatever it is, one has always ability to be objective. There are certain parts always in communication that have scientific evidences, and certain parts always that is, just simple, what do you say? It's talk. So you have to be able to filter. Particularly if you're a scientist, this should not be very difficult, in the sense that you ask yourself, if this is being said, what is the evidence for this, and are the evidences for anything that I should believe in there, and if there are not, then what is the likelihood of it to be true? And you don't have to necessarily always have an evidence for certain things to be true. There's also something called assumption likelihood, right? Also, and one can actually engage some of the intuitiveness also, and some of the experiences also, right? But you have to always go answering a question in a very objective manner. So as long as you engage your rationality in getting yourself the right answer, you will always have the right answer, as long as you are following TikTok. I'm sorry, I will not be able to help you there.
Khalid, let me help with that question. There's an entity called Health Analytics Asia. It is run by Syed Nazakat, happens to be a Kashmiri. I would urge, I missed the name of the person who raised this issue. I would urge him to look up Health Analytics Asia. This group works in Asia Pacific countries that are in New Delhi and Singapore, and they focus exclusively on fake news in health sciences and public health programs. My recommendation to the person who was asked this question is, please use only WhatsApp to send messages. Don't read what has become in India, WhatsApp University. That's not the place to get the knowledge. So that will be my 2 cents on that. Khalid, you're muted. Khalid. Khalid, you're muted, Khalid.
Yeah. Okay. May I just move to Dr. Khalid Shah? Is he with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So there's one question from Hilal Ahmed Khan. He says that, is there any difference between statement of purpose and letter of interest? And what should we keep in consideration while we write a research proposal for a prospective mentor?
Well, I think, again, when it depends on what level you're writing. If you're writing for a postdoc position, is this for a postdoc position or is this for a PhD? Depending.
He's doing his PhD, so I assume he must be trying for a postdoc position.
Yeah. So for a postdoc position, again, I think I would highly recommend a simplified email rather than any attachments because I think if you're not convincing somebody by the first 4 or 5 lines in your email, they're not going to go into the statement of work and letter of intent and other things. So I would simplify and write 6, 7 good lines of who you are and why you want to join and what you have done. And the second question was, what was the second part?
Just a second, so I just lost the question. So yeah, it's like what's the difference between statement of purpose and letter of interest?
And the second part was I answered the first one.
And yeah, what things should be considered while writing a research proposal for a prospective mentor?
Okay, again, as I said earlier, that you really need to understand what the mentor is doing. What have they published in last 3-4 years? And if they can actually see on their website or their meeting abstracts what they are currently working on, and really spend time on understanding the whole, the lab and their proposals. And basically, don't write anything that sort of says, I want to, this is my proposal. I would rather engage a mentor by saying, this is what my expertise is, and this is what your lab does, and this is how I would fit in your lab. It's very simple because again, good mentors get a lot of CVs, get a lot of emails, and somehow you have to catch that by making them attentive to what you write. So it's a simple email, get them engaged, and then you can go into the next phase. But don't just send them proposals, because most of the times they are very off from what the PI is thinking, what the mentor is thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Khalid Saab. May I just go to Dr. Rafet Hassan? Okay, let me unmute you, sir. Okay. Okay, please unmute yourself. So we have a question from Gausia Jilani. She says that, does only CV matter, or other credentials of a candidate also have a role to play? And how can we write an attractive CV?
So that's a very good question. So 2 points. So CV matters. I think that when you are applying for a postdoc position, the most important thing is, for me at least, is to see what you did during your PhD. Did you publish it, or is the manuscript under publication? So I think that is key. If you describe your PhD, but you have not published it, you don't have the manuscript in preparation, then you worry about that. So I think in a CV, the most important thing is to very clearly outline what you did in the PhD and that it is being sent or is being published. And the second part, which I at least look at, is the letter of recommendation. So what your PI thinks about you, how your work has gone, and how collegial you are. So I think those are the two important things, is to see whether you have published or about to publish your PhD, and to communicate very nicely, as Humara said earlier, what the problem was and what you found, and be passionate about that, as Khalid mentioned. And the second is letter of recommendation. So those are the two more important criteria I look at. Passionate about that.
So may I just go to Altaf Saab? Altaf Saab, there's one question from Murtaza Manzoor. He says that, have you ever felt that students of Kashmir are lacking a stage or an exposure? And if we lack a stage and exposure, how should we proceed to overcome these problems?
So Murtaza Saab, thank you so much for asking the question. You heard 4 individuals, and there are many more in outside United States, who were you 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. We trained ourselves, we got information, absorbed it, became better than many other people. You heard Rafit from NIH, Harvard, Purdue, institutions of prominence and excellence. So the confidence has to come from within. You do not lack anything. You think you lack. The key is to get better at what you do. Read someone's paper. Read papers in your space, your field of interest. Read from outside too. Understand how people hypothesize, how they put logics in front, how do they criticize each other in a polite manner. So all of this will come with time, but I want you to believe in that you are as good as anyone else. But you then have to study hard to be better than someone else.
Thank you so much, Altaf Saab. May I just move to Humara Adi? Is she around? Okay, I'll just unmute you. Please unmute yourself. So we have a question from Mr. Mustafa Khan. Why is it necessary to have a language test cleared, for instance, GRE or TOEFL, rather than somebody testing us on the basis of our research background or publications?
If you're talking about PhD, first of all, that's what you would be talking about, right? PhD, right? Why should I have to do GRE? Why should I have language? We're talking about communication skills here. First answer to the question is that that question is directed to the wrong person, because I don't make the rules, right? Second, the question itself is, if we are talking about communication, the medium of science communication is English. Whatever we do, we have to be able to, in some way, learn to be able to write or speak at least the level of English that it is communicable, right? So in some way, most of the institutions in the United States do justify the use of TOEFL and GRE's language part as being important, so that students don't fall off the cliff once they're here. It's very hard to have a student here and he's not able to communicate. So they have to ensure that these students are going to be successful. So they do make it a kind of a requirement that they should have they should have a proper GRE language scores. Because we do have seen probably previously that in my institution, we had some students, foreign students come in, and when they're not able to talk to their colleagues in the lab or talk to the PI. Forget about writing. We're not even going to that point, right? It became really hard, and some of them had to leave. So you just don't want to be in that position, neither as a PI, nor as an institute, nor as a department, that you have to deal with a student who just cannot fit in. So that's the answer.
So we have a next question. Anybody among us, the panelists, can take it up. It's a question from Mr. Murtaza. He says that was the appropriate time to interact or communicate with the prospective mentor, and should we engage with the mentor only through emails, or we can have some personal? I mean, we have to personally meet them also at some conferences or so.
Well, I can take it. If you have a possibility of meeting someone personally and being able to, like Khalid said earlier, that he met someone in a meeting and they said, send me your CV. This has happened to me also. My first break, basically what I say is, first job was when I left Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. I was a PhD student there. Although it's a great institution, but let's say that I was thinking beyond that. And when I got an offer to go to Germany, it was only just a coffee board meeting with a scientist who came to give a talk, and I spoke to him in length about how I see my project and how I think these enzymes should work. And perhaps it was detailed enough that he said, why don't you come over? So it does help often but there was no intention of me trying to impress him that I wanted to go to Germany, and I didn't even want to. I mean, it didn't even occur to me that. So you have to be very careful about what you are really trying to do. If you try to meet people, just impress them in a way that you just make it too obvious that you want to go to their lab, that's also not fun. You have to, when you communicate to people, you communicate about your science, and you communicate it passionately, not kind of inclining in a manner like, I'm doing this only because I want to join your lab, because that can really hurt you. So it disturbs people, right? So just be confident about who you are and what you do, and communicate your work and your science and your passion well, and everything, like Khalid said, will fall in place.
So we have next question from Raja Zulkarnain. Probably Altaf Saab, you can take this question. It's like how to overcome shyness and speak confidently before your lab mates or others.
So Raja Bhai, you described, I think, is a phenomenon, and that also stems from the situation you live in Kashmir. Right? There's a bit of tightness individually and collectively, population level. Doesn't mean you cannot work on it. Humaira mentioned journal club. Those will be the best opportunities for you to expose yourself. Become a part of journal club. If you don't have one, start one. That's the opportunity you will have to speak. First journal club may be a disaster. That's all right. Look at the third and the fourth and the fifth journal club. You will get better. That's how we've gotten better. If you had to ask each one of us what was our first interaction in journal club, you. So don't feel bad about it. Shyness will go away as long as you understand how to become better communicator and better speaker. For that, the knowledge is good. If you have the knowledge, you will become a communicator.
May I just take this opportunity, Altaf Saab, to our audience, that our next program will focus on certain clubs. For instance, we have a specialized nano club. We'll have a specialized neuroscience club. We are also envisioning a journal club as well that we will be probably starting soon. So we move on to the next question. So can I have Dr. Rafet Hassan, please? So the question is from Mr. Riaz Hassan. He says that I'm interested in doing a postdoctorate, but I do not know how to approach a prospective mentor. Please give some suggestions.
Sure. So I think to start with, during your PhD, you'll be working on a particular field. So by that time, you will have a good sense of others who work on a similar field. So you could find who are the experts in that, and you can write to them. But also it is not necessary that in your postdoc you work on the same field. You might want to go to a different field. So I think the most important thing is when you approach someone for a postdoc is to be very, very familiar with their work, as Khalid mentioned earlier, and to articulate why you want to join the lab. And it needs to be very succinct that this is what I have done, but I want to move to a different field, and this is what I want to do, and why your lab would be good for me. So I think it needs some thought process and a very clear view why you want to join that lab, and then communicate to that. But you should have done your homework, especially knowing what their lab works on, and come up with your own ideas. So I think it's a matter of communication, but giving it a very thought. And I think Khalid Shah very rightly said, you don't want to send your CV to, say, 30 labs, but maybe shortlist 10 labs or something like that. But you have to articulate why you would benefit their lab. So ultimately, all of us, when we're looking for someone, or when someone looked at us, they want to know what we would bring to the lab. So I think you have to be, again, your best advocate. Don't feel shy about it. Be confident. This is how I can help your lab, kind of say it in a nice way. But you should be persuasive, advocate for yourself, and know what the lab does, and very clearly articulate what you will bring to that lab.
So Altaf Saab, we have a very generalized question. May I request you to kindly take this up? We have a question from Umar Ashraf. He says that as far as communication skills are concerned, what should be the focus of or the structure of curriculum back home in our schools?
Very good. Umar Saab, thank you so much, because he rightly picks the issue. Communication starts early on. It doesn't start at master's level or PhD level. And it does not start at Burn Hall or convent school or mission school, Bisco school, Shivana. It starts with you individually. I think it was Humaira or Khalid who mentioned, Khalid mentioned, we are experts in memorizing. And I'll give you my example. I studied at Kendra Vidyalaya in Sonwar. Sanskrit was subject, many of, but 3 years in Sanskrit, I memorized the whole thing. Question paper to torne fikre. Me memorized those, pass course. But I don't still know what I did. So what I'm asking you is, communication starts, I would say, with middle school onwards. Even if it is not, and this is something to convey to your nephews and nieces and kids, even if the school isn't asking you to write an essay, have them write at home an essay of what they did that day. Have them write an essay on the family they're part of. Have them write an essay on the neighborhood they're. Bring these writing skills to them, and also work with them in communication. Let them make mistakes. School mein nahi ho raha. Ye aap apne gharon mein, and that culture, inshallah and mashallah, will continue and go forward when they enter the formal colleges and universities.
So Humaradi, may I just come to you? Please unmute yourself. So we have a question from Huma. She has done her master's in clinical biochemistry, and she says that I have had a gap of over 3 years since I completed my master's, and I want to pursue my PhD. So how can I write an impactful CV, and will this gap of 3 years have an impact if I write to prospective supervisors?
Now the question is, will the gap have an impact? The truthful answer is yes, but the practical answer is not necessarily for everybody, right? So when you say You want to, if you're trying to apply to 10 places, will all 10 places take it evenly? No. I mean, these are matters. There is always a human being on the other side. One has to always remember, right? So, and then you have what I suggest, you write your story. Why do you have a gap? You see sometimes, accepting certain things up front or acknowledging something actually does wonders. You say that I finished my PhD, but because of so and so reasons, I was not able to continue for these years. However, I am extremely passionate about going forward in doing so and so. So when you upfront accept that you have a gap, and then kind of reason, you don't have to give all personal details, but rationally try to describe, even if you have to bring some of if it's so personal, you can always say because of certain personal family reasons, but do accept it, acknowledge it, don't leave it as a gap in your CV, right? Because then people have to make their own assumptions. So if you give a lead to that communication, then there will be someone who might say, well, this person is still passionate. So which also means that your personal statement has to be really, really good. You have an extra task to communicate why you want to continue, even though you had a gap, and how did that gap impact you, in the sense that you had to write a story about yourself, right? That even if I was for 3 years out there and not able to work, but I continue to have my passion. In those days I have continued reading or done something to keep my passion to do PhD. So what have you done? Not if you were not in the lab or doing really academic work, how have you kept your fire on? And that passion part has to be a bit more emphasized in a personal statement. And I'm sure, inshallah, somebody, if not all 10 of 10, but 4 of 10, 3 of 10 will be interested and may reply to you. So make the right choice of the people and places you're applying for. It shouldn't be a problem. Between MS and PhD, even easier, because people will want to look at if you're particularly applying in the United States. If you're applying in India, it might even not be much of a problem, because it's usually after PhD people get a little bit more, it gets more trickier.
So we'll take a few more questions and then we wind up with this session, and we give the floor to Jamil Saab. Jamil Saab, please be ready after a few minutes. So I have a question, very important one. So may I request Rafat Saab to please take this up. We have a question from Bisma Bukhari. She says that what things we need to keep in mind while writing a SCA letter to get a postdoctoral position? I'm unmuting you. Please unmute yourself, Rafat Saab. Yeah, please.
Sure. So I think the most important thing is, I think what Khalid especially talked about, when you write, best way maybe to communicate for the email, give a very brief description about what you have, where you are from, or where you did your PhD and what your thesis was, but focus on what you did, and then communicate that you want to join the lab because it fits in with your interest. And I think most important thing, that's the theme of today's webinar, is storytelling. So you tell, but it has to be a scientific storytelling. So you say that I worked on X problem, but this is an unresolved question in this field, and I want to study how this can be improved by studying XYZ. And your lab I feel is studying that and will benefit me. And so I think it has to be a story, scientific story, but laying out what you have done very briefly, what the problem is you want to solve, and why you think that lab will be good at that. But I think an email communication, not very lengthy, but very clear articulation and a compelling email that one is interested in learning more about you. So I think that's the key, very simple, short, to the point. But I think at the same time, you are not, you want to say what you will bring to the table so that the lab is excited about you and wants to really recruit you.
Okay, one open question, probably if Khalid Saab would take this up. How important is research ethics, and in present times, we're also facing serious issues with plagiarism. I mean, I don't say that everybody does that, but it's a very hot issue around. So please just make us understand a few things about research ethics and plagiarism, please. I have unmuted you. Please unmute yourself, Khalid Sahab. Okay, cool.
Okay. Yeah, I think ethics are becoming a critical issue now. If you look at 10 years before, the papers wouldn't ask for original data, original Western blots or original DNA sequencing data. We just published a paper in Science Translational Medicine, and they asked us for every blot, every raw data piece that we had. So ethics, I don't think the journals will accept papers where you don't have all the raw data. That's one part of the story. The other part is when you write, you're writing an introduction or you're citing papers. You can't, I think you have to understand the definition of plagiarism. Sometimes we say that if we reference and keep the sentences same, you're not plagiarizing. Well, that's not true. You got to change the sentence. So now all journals, most of them, will run your paper through a website, through a program that tells them which sentences have been copied. So I don't think you can get past the journal, without letting them go through the check of plagiarism. But I think for your own conscience, it's really important that you develop this habit of being fair. And I wanted to reiterate that point in what I said earlier, that when you are, so that the fair comes from, so there are two fairs. I'm talking about F-E-A-R, fair. When you're fearful, it comes from 2 points. It comes from when you're unjust and when you're not fair. So it's also, again, if you go look at all the religious books, the fairness and the just, being just, it will make you fearless. And once you become that, you can do anything. We all come from similar backgrounds, and we were not exactly what we are now. That will develop, and that, I think, for the ethical part, again, that you have to be just and fair and keep those two principles. You will never get involved or tangled into any of these plagiarism or any ethical issues, because you're basically doing it out of the habit. It won't happen suddenly. You have to make a habit at every level, starting from your home. Then it will trickle into your work. I hope I answered it correctly, but this is a general statement.
Thank you so much, Khalid Saab. So before we wind up this webinar, I would like to thank everybody for being with us today, in particular Altaf Sahab, Rafat Hassan, Humaira Gawar, and Khalid Shah Saab. We just lost Altaf Saab. He's in back. Just a few minutes. Okay, Altaf Saab, are you back with us?
I am back. I momentarily lost connectivity.
Okay, so I was just saying that we will be winding up the webinar in a few minutes. So before we do that, I would like to thank you, Dr. Altaf Saab, for being with us. You have been consistently with us, giving us a lot of time, encouraged us to do this while we all were actually working on it. You gave us sample ideas to actually make it more effective for our people back home. So I would like to request everybody to have some concluding remarks, and also, how do you think we as a team or a family in JK Scientists can improve JK Scientists to have a lasting impression for our students back home? Altaf Saab first.
Thank you so much, Khalid. Thank you, everyone that is listening. I understand that there were some 2G issues and some of you got bumped out. This, I would like us all to know and believe, is a first interaction, perhaps of many future interactions. We may not be the people you will hear or see, but I'll work with JK scientists to make sure that we have subsequent interactions where we may bring other subject matter experts. You may want to run a program on engineering, on architecture, on humanities, and legal affairs. So do consider us as your partners. Do consider as those who are going to work for you, those who will work with you. But what we need from you is a commitment that come tomorrow, I'm going to do certain things. If I was you, I will read one scientific paper a day for those who are in the master's and PhD. I'll just, from the labs who are doing similar work that you do, I will read extensively one review a week, understand what is happening in that space. Master's program perhaps is going to be the key program, those of you who are still in the master's, because that's where you get the global knowledge of what is ahead of you. PhD, you focus on something, and Rafet and Humaira and Khalid mentioned, then you show that you can do that in the vision of the laboratory, the vision of the PI, and then you graduate into still going deep diving something that Humaira is doing, Rafet is doing, and Khalid is doing. I want to make the last comment. This is not only for people who are in PhD sciences. Medical sciences people should also consider career in academic medicine, whether in India or outside India. You have at Sher-e-Kashmir Institute of Medical Sciences, Parvez Kaul, probably one of the best pulmonologists, who's publishing from there in Lancet and other places. Probably the best person who understands the flu in Kashmir and in India. So read, practice, write, speak. Back to you, Khalid.
So may I just go to Dr. Rafet Hassan, last concluding remarks and how we can improve at JK Scientists and have a lasting impact on the student community back home.
Thank you, Khalid. And as I mentioned, this is my first interaction with JK Scientist. I'm not a PhD, but I do science. And so I learned a lot, talking to you today, and then also looking at your website and all the work that you have done. So I think you guys are already doing a great job in very diverse field. So I think continuing these interactions, having seminars like these, like webinars on how to communicate, as well as more focused seminars, as you mentioned, maybe people who are interested in a particular topic such as immunotherapy, and just making those interactions. And then happy to meet on my visits to Kashmir or other students who are interested through emails, whatever way, happy to do that. And I will continue to learn a little bit more about JK Scientists, but I think you guys are already doing a wonderful job. And I didn't even know that this resource or this foundation existed. So it has been really a great learning go for me.
Thank you so much, Rafet Saab, for boosting our morale. So may I just go to Dr. Humaira Gawhar? Please unmute yourself, Humaira Di. And your concluding remarks. And since you're part of JK Scientists since a couple of years, you have been doing a lot of good things with us. So, but still, would like to hear from you some concluding remarks and how we can improve at JK Scientists.
Concluding remark for this particular webinar is just get over that compliment you got from your childhood. You should be sure and you felt great about that. That's not what it is about. You need to get out of that compliment feeling, that rewarded feeling of you were rewarded for something that was not so amazing. Okay. So must go away. Is something you need to develop. Humility is fantastic, but you have to be your own advocate. It's not called bragging always. I've seen people get mad at other people saying, but at times you, particularly when you go out for job applications, you have to emphasize on your best part. If you don't, then nobody will advocate for you. So these are two important things. This is a cultural thing. You unfortunately will have to kind of dive into these unknown waters, which you have not learned from your home, from your mom has said, insanas paise thoda sa humility shijan. Magar when job applications asan, if you can't talk about yourself because you think how you should, you need to go out of that comfort zone. You feel comfortable there because that is where you have been, what you have been taught. About JK Scientists, you guys have been doing a fantastic job. I've seen this place and space grow from few people to so many scientists, young budding minds, great people, and people who truly want to invest. And it's also a great source for you to learn other potential job possibilities in science, like science communication, science writing, and JK Scientists can actually become a stepping stone for people like you who could actually make this as a part of their career also. So besides being a source which will be good for other people to understand how science is done, it will also perhaps become a source or a means for people to develop the skill of becoming science communicators. So yeah, I think I'll stop here. And great job. Thank you very much for.
So may I just move on to Dr. Khalid Saab. Khalid Saab, are you with us? Yeah. Okay. I will just unmute you and. Okay, Khalid Saab, your concluding remarks about the webinar and your suggestions for us to improve at JK Scientists. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's fine.
No, thank you. This was great. Again, I honestly didn't know much about the JK Scientists, so I learned over the last 1 week. And thank you for putting this together. You are doing a fantastic job. I think one suggestion that I have is again, bring diversity from the bring different fields. As Altaf mentioned, that we can have people who can coach on different aspects and within different fields, and then also from and also have some focused seminars, as Rafat mentioned, that maybe a seminar specifically on genomics or immunology, and that will actually get people sort of deep dive into a specific field, because this is more of a general thing now. I think it's important. I think as we move forward, the specificity in the fields will help. And my suggestion for budding people in Kashmir, I think, you guys are amazingly talented. It's all, as I said initially when I started, an hour ago, I said that there are 5 cognitive areas, and we've been only tested in Kashmir for 1 or 2, maybe memory and maybe attention, but not others. And maybe look deep and deep dive into yourself. Maybe there is something else in you which has not been explored, because ultimately we find that 30 years later, that, oh, maybe I was good at that. If you find this early on, 20 years early, you will do much, much better than any of us. So I think there is something there. Believe that there is, even people here within MIT and Harvard, these guys have come from areas which are not even, on the world map, known to people. So there is talent, there is hidden talent, and I think Kashmir has an incredible amount of talent. We just have to believe in ourselves and explore ourselves. And it is up to us. I don't think anybody will find a talent in you. It's up to you yourself to figure out, maybe this is what I want, this is what I have. And that will only come when you focus. Don't try to do too many things. Try to focus on one thing. That will come. The rest will come. Thank you again for organizing this.
Thank you so much, Khalid Saab. Once again, on behalf of JK Scientists, I thank wholeheartedly the entire panel today, Dr. Altaf Saab, Dr. Rafid Hassan, Dr. Humaira Gauhar, Dr. Khalid Shah, for being with us today, enlightening us and our people back home about soft skills, which includes, for instance, the writing and the spoken communication as well. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers, Mr. Asif Bakshi, Saima Beg, Dr. Zahoor, and Dr. Jamil for organizing this wonderful webinar. And I hope that we'll have more fruitful things to do in future related to these particular aspects. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to tell you today, to the audience today, that we have revamped our mentorship program, and Dr. Jamil, who is with us today, he's the chair for our mentorship program. We're giving him 10 minutes to just take us through the revamped mentorship program. Dr. Jamil, on to you, please. Dr. Jamil, can you unmute yourself, please?
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening to everyone. Good morning to the people on the other side of the world. First, I want to thank you to Dr. Altafla, Dr. Humaira Gauhar, Dr. Khalid Shah, Dr. Rafit Hassan for an insightful talk. While this JKS Sprout program was already working, but the most pertinent thing to mention as of now is that the session which was most related to the kind of how to sell yourself. That makes me to speak about the mentorship program which we are going to launch. So this JK Scientist is launching.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jamil Sahab. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are left with only 7 minutes before our meeting.
I will complete in 5 minutes.
Sure, please.
So JK Scientist is launching a new thriving and impactful mentorship program, which is a part of Sprout, which we say support program for research outreach and upskill technology. The program has 4 phases, or what I call them as a series, with an objective to have an specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and future-bound kind of objectives. If I, have a kind of growth diagram of the mentorship program, which we are going to have, which, as I previously mentioned, we have 4 phases: P0, P1, P2, and P3 phase. P1, we have divided it as a welcome phase, where we ask the participants who are willing for the mentorship to write the forms, to submit the forms. After that, we have the home, which is a kind of common platform for all mentees. As the present session, which was the tip of the iceberg today, where we train them to write CVs, to write statement of purposes, cover letter, to teach them basic software. There are people who are not well acquainted with the basic software of PowerPoint presentations or Microsoft Office, other software. So we teach them in this second phase, P1 phase. We have the grid phase, where we have the club bound or club specific general training program, as mentioned by Dr. Khalid Shah. So we have the clubs, like we have already made the physics club, is ready with us with Anhabat. We have the neurobiology club, which is ready with Dr. Mubarak. And similarly, we have multiple clubs, which will be headed by different subject matter specialists, multiple subject matter specialists, and then they will be guided in a club. That will be our phase 2. To add to this point, that it is in phased manner. The person who will qualify for writing the form will only go to the next phase. Similarly, when the person has done with the grid phase, we will have a pilot phase, where which is our final phase, which is our one-to-one mentorship phase, where we will be assigning, not exactly we, the mentees who are already in the grid phase will be choosing the mentees, or mentees in both phases will be choosing their mentors from their club, and there will be a one-to-one kind of mentorship. The reason we did all this type of stepwise phase was the reason that we saw that people actually ask the mentors. The first question they ask, please share me your CV. I want to copy the CV from your CV. Or how do we write an email? So that is not what a mentor, first mentee is to, should be teaching. So we actually, divided into a number of phases. So at last we will have a JK scholar to kind of, give participants a look that Well, phase 0 is for just for security, and we will have an own phase for common platform for mentees for soft skills or how to sell yourself. And then, as I mentioned, we have a grid for club specific trainings held by professional people, and we have a pilot, which is the last one-to-one phase. So in this, what I want to have a funnel process of mentorship is that we may have 100 or 200 people who will be successful in writing the forms. But even if we are able to successfully have one-to-one mentorship for 4 or 5 people or 7 people in a particular club, successfully, that will be our main objective. Because most of the time mentees give up, during the phase of mentorship. At last, I want to thank Ms. Anha Bhatt. She is the mentorship chair, Khalid Gul and Asif Bakshi for helping in devising the mentorship program. Thank you. Over to Khalid Gul.
Thank you so much, Jamil Saab, for giving us a preview of the revamped mentorship program today. I hope this is a perfect time for students back home. They can take advantage of JK Scientist vis-a-vis revised mentorship program as we'll be launching it soon. So at last, I would once again like to thank Dr. Altaf Lal, Dr. Rafat Hassan, Dr. Humaira Gauhar, Dr. Khalid Shah for being with us today. I understand that it's not very easy for them to spare not just 2 hours. They have been with us since almost 14 days or more than that, communicating with us often. And I would like to thank them on behalf of JK Scientists. I'd also like to thank Director JK Scientists, Dr. Said Mubarak Hussain, for giving us this wonderful opportunity, and he has been steering us throughout the journey. So thank you so much, everybody who has joined us on our Zoom platform, and also to those who joined us on our Facebook platform. I also want to reiterate that this webinar has been a success. We had over 1,000 registered participants for this webinar, but we had to select only 100 or more based capacity on the Zoom. So we selected only 100 participants, but the rest of the people who have not been with us today on our Zoom platform, we will have more fruitful things for them, and I hope that they would have learned today how to communicate with their peers or other people. Thank you so much once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melody. Altaf Saab.
Thank you to everyone, and to you, Khalid, as well.
Thank you so much. Khud Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.
Khud Hafiz.